Greetings to everyone who enjoys a nice game of chess. My name is Sergio, and today I would like to show you a game of my own, which I recently played. So I have my nice cup of coffee next to me. I'm ready to show you the game and to provide you a small analysis of this game. So let's begin. I played with the black pieces in this game. My opponent played e4. I replied with c6. So this is the Caro-Kann defense. He replied with d4. I replied with d5. E captures on d5. C captures on d5. And now c4. So with this move, the opponent invites me to capture the c4 pawn, thus creating an isolated pawn in the middle of the board, in the center of the board, which I gladly do. So I capture the pawn on c4. He recaptures with the bishop. Then I develop my knight to c6. He is getting ready to castle and also developing his knight. I develop my bishop, pinning the knight, but this is actually an inaccuracy because this allows my opponent to check my king, to capture the pawn on f7. So also to take away my rights of castling, plus spoiling my pawn structure. So I have to take, but of course this allows a nice check and a discovery attack on the bishop. I have to retreat back. My opponent is capturing the bishop on g4, and now he has a nice position. But still, he has quite a significant advantage. But the game is on. So this I'm capturing now the pawn on d4. And now if my opponent would play queen to e2, this is a quiet move which still keeps his advantage because of my position, which I'm not allowed to castle, and he'll just have a nice lead in development. Then he could castle, for example. Let's say he could castle. I could bring my knight in, and he could play something like rook to d1, and you see he has started already an attack while I'm not even developed, and my position is just terrible at this moment. However, my opponent did not play that. He captured the queen. I recaptured with the knight. So now the position is pretty much equal. Also, I'm attacking now. If my opponent is not careful, I'm threatening to capture the rook with a fork. Yeah, so this, of course, my opponent prevents that. He plays knight to a3, so taking the c2 square under control, not allowing my knight to go there with the check. So I open my bishop for an attack for his knight, and I'm threatening also to double his a-pawn. He castles, so I go on with my plan. I'm capturing the knight. He recaptures. He's doubling the pawn, and this is something I personally dislike, to have the pawns on the rim of the board doubled. However, still this is not a lost position or anything. It's still playable. Now I'm I'm kicking the knight away from my territory, and if he would retreat his knight to f3, which didn't happen in the game, I would capture with check. He has to recapture with the g pawn, thus creating 3 pawn islands, and 2 of which will have a doubled isolated pawn. So this is not a fun position to play. My opponent didn't go for that. Instead, he removed his knight to e4. Now I'm developing my knight, and I'm asking my opponent, would you like to capture it, which my opponent does. And by this I fix my pawn, my isolated pawn in the middle. Now it's well protected. my opponent moved the bishop to to b2. So now I play this nice little check, which gives me a tempo because I'm improving the position of the knight, and his only move is to move his king to the corner to h1 square. So now, what to do for me in this position? I need to bring the rooks into the game and to infiltrate as much as possible into the opponent's territory. So ideally, I would like to place my rooks on c2 and on d2 to be able to paralyze totally the opponent's pieces. So I start with my plan. I play rook from a to c8. Why not to d8? Because in this position, my opponent would play any rook to d1, capture, capture. Now looks like I just helped my opponent because my rook is still blocked by my king, and my opponent's rook is very well mobilized in the middle of the board. So I didn't do that. I played rook to c8, and of course this move would be impossible because the square is protected by my knight. Okay, so my opponent play rook to b1, which allowed me to infiltrate with my first rook to c2, which I planned already. And now he has a passive position. It's actually an equal position, but still not easy to come up with a good move right now. So my opponent is attacking my knight, but is not threatening to capture it because it's protected by the rook. Okay, so I make some room for my second rook to be brought into the game. My opponent makes a passive move, and now already I have a slight advantage, which is insignificant. However, it's very easy. It's a very easy game for me to play, and not easy for my opponent to find the right moves. Plus, this game is without increment, so you have to think fast. Otherwise, the time is ticking down, and you might just lose on time in the end. Okay, so I bring the second rook on the d file. My opponent plays king to g2, and this is a passive move. Okay, now as planned, my both rooks are on c2 and d2, nicely attacking everything. And now my opponent moved the king to f3, which is a mistake. But I mean, in that position, it was already difficult for him to find any plan to come out of this position. So I'm just capturing the bishop. Okay, and now he has to recapture. And in this position, if I would be to recapture the rook, then it's actually a bad move because my opponent would recapture the knight. Now we have an equal position regardless if I capture or if I move the rook. Captures, and now you see the position is... I think I still have an advantage, but it's not winning. So instead what I did not recapture the rook automatically. That's why it's always a good idea to assess first the position and then recapture. So I played this nice check, knight to d4 check, and now whatever the king plays, he can't attack. He is attacking the both pieces, but my knight is already protected by the pawn. I just captured the bishop in this position, and my opponent resigned because I'm simply up a knight. I have a nice pawn structure. The a2 pawn is falling, the a3 pawn is falling. I'm gonna have no difficulties in winning this game. Plus, at this moment, I was about 5 minutes on the clock, and my opponent had a bit more time. He had about 6 minutes, which didn't really matter in the end. So yeah, my opponent resigned. I would like to thank my opponent for the nice game. He played a very decent game, and I hope everyone liked this video. Thank you.